Hello and welcome back to Hadoop Exam Learning Resources. Now in this session we will cover basic concept of domain driven design. Something will be repeated which we have covered in previous session, but that would be good to revise this stuff and to understand in detail again. So domain driven design, what it is, basically it is sometimes referred as a triple D. Domain is a top priority and not a technical solution. So when you work with the domain driven design, so your domain is a way on the top priority and technical solution is not a top priority. That is the difference when you use the domain driven design. As name suggests, while developing a software, our focus should be on domain rather than technology. Like when you work with the insurance domain, when you work with the banking domain, trading domain, benchmarking domain, then you need to focus first while designing on this domain. Triple D is learning through model building, and it is a software modeling tool. Domain driven design is what? Software modeling tool. You are going to, so after triple D, what is your output? A software model basically, correct? So that is what domain model you can say. That is my output is coming after when I work with the domain driven design, my output is a domain model. Domain modeling is done using the set of patterns, so it follows some design pattern. If you have gone through the object oriented design pattern, or a book you have read it, like for design various design patterns, so some of the design patterns are used in the domain driven design, especially factories, repositories, then interfaces. These some design patterns are used, not all, in the domain driven design, so that you should know. And being a software engineer, you must know all the design pattern which basically comes after the especially object oriented scheming. Like for example, factory is a design pattern, correct? Your repository is a design pattern, your iteration is a design pattern, or decorator is a design pattern, correct? So this you should know. Basically that is what it means here. Software developer and architect must know the triple D, which we have discussed. Domain driven design, domain driven design can reduce the pain for designing complex project. This is very critical line you need to understand. Like without domain, without a good designing solution, your software cannot be that good. Software conforms to a domain model. The advantage of doing the domain driven design, it or any designing, in fact, when you develop your software, you confirm like whatever I'm developing that follows this model, whatever architect had already given, or any developer who is working and the senior developer has created a domain model or model out of this, then your software developer has to confirm like this is what I'm following it, and it should conform with the whatever the domain model is defined. So that has to be confirmed with that. Evolving process. Domain driven design is an evolving process. We have discussed this, and consisting of iterative cycles. So applying strategic and tactical tools, which we'll discuss, but we let me skip this part. Subdomain. A domain can split into subdomain. For example, an online travel booking website subdomain can be what? Your booking, your accounting, payment, identity management, flight search. These are all subdomain. So that is very critical. When you work with the domain driven design, you need to clearly find what are my subdomain when I work on this basically. And even in fact in your subdomain you can remove it, or what you can buy it from outside world, that you should be able to find it out. What you can build as part of this, that you should be able to find it out. Domain model, it is an like that is what it is an output, correct? Basically which is after domain driven design we are expecting. It is an abstraction of the business domain which incorporates the behavior and data necessary to satisfy the business requirement. So your domain um, model must as an output, it should be in a business, it should satisfy the business requirement. The domain model is a solution space we have discussed, and how we are going to solve a business problem. Domain model refers to an abstraction to a subdomain basically. So that is what we have discussed. So this is an abstraction of a various subdomain inside a basically a domain you can say. So and they are how they are related to each other as well. So that is an abstraction to your still if you are not able to understand, wait in few minutes or in the next session you would be able to understand more, but just try to understand it. This is an abstraction of the subdomain. So basically you need to find it out what all are my subdomain. And domain model is a classes, you can say objects, generally not directly classes and object we represent, that would come bit later. But yes, that map to this, and exactly you should be able to understand when you work with the object in classes, like which bounded context or which subdomain this class belongs to. That is what we need to able to find it out. Domain model can be presented using UML diagram. Even English sentences can be used to represent your domain model. The domain model is consisting of bounded context segment of the solution. This is one part. There, okay, bounded context. So this is, you can say this is bounded context, and each bounded context has other stuff as well, which we will discuss. So these are all four bounded contexts here, you can see. So for four subdomains, so one subdomain maps to your one bounded context, you can say. Okay, now when we talk about strategic design, basically, correct, so in oops, we thought like in case of objects, whenever you, if somebody talk about object oriented programming, so you always think in terms of the objects, correct, objects and classes. So that is oops. But when you talk about strategic design in the domain driven design, you always talk in terms of the context, in which context. So, or you can say bounded context, or you can say your subdomain, basically, correct, but you should use the term bounded context. Subdomain is a one-to-one mapping. So what is strategic design is a set of principles, correct, which are guidelines, patterns for maintaining model integrity, like some patterns in would be used, distilling the business domain model. So what all business requirement you are distilling it and coming out with this strategic design, working with multiple models, like because everything is divided in subdomains. So that is what it is. Strategic design is very useful to divide a large and complex business problem into multiple chunks with clear boundaries and specific responsibilities, and build a high level software design topology. Understood? Like, uh, we have discussed this already, basically, correct? So that is what it's a mainly the strategic design pattern. Find out what is the strategic more important for business and divide work based on the importance. So that is what you would do as part of your strategic tool, correct. So here you can see this is my domain. I have divided in three subdomain. So that is what here, convert each subdomain as a service, or when you develop microservice based framework, so then each subdomain, or you can say this is my one bounded context, this maps to a one microservice. That is what you can say when you designing this software. So after design, strategic design of your project, you should have a ubiquitous language. For this domain, you should have a bounded context defined, and you should have a context map. What all three are, we will discuss. Bounded context you can assume is equal to your one subdomain in a model. But what is ubiquitous language and context map will come in this, correct. So this is what we have discussed it previously, correct. This is strategic tools, and these three things are part of this, which is once you learn or you complete this training, you should be able to work, you should be able to find this stuff while working with the domain expert. What is my ubiquitous language, what is my bounded context, what is my context map, as part of strategic tool, and as part of tactical tools you should be able to find this. Okay, so that is a strategic tool, some introduction. Now in next session we'll go deeper with the bounded context and then ubiquitous language and etc. So thanks for watching. Now I'm stopping.